Good morning. It is Tuesday morning, September 26th, 2023, and it is AA Day. So I'm going to go over a couple of my rules. Please, no judgment, no harassment, and be kind to each other. And no bullying, please. This is for helping people and not bringing people down. So this is a positive meeting to help others with alcoholism or family members who just want to see if they can help a family member or a friend to become sober. So please be mindful of that. Not everybody that comes in here is an alcoholic or is a recovering alcoholic, just so y'all know. But I'm going to go ahead and get into the serenity prayer and do the steps and stuff. Sorry about the dog's nails. I really need to clip them. What are you eating? What are you eating? Too late now. He swallowed it. This dog, man. Anyways, let's get on with the meeting. I'm glad you're all here. Whoever you are, I know my sister's in here, as always, a big support to me, and I appreciate you more than you know. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So, here we go. Step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We're entirely to have God remove all these defective characters. 7. Humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continue to take personal inventory, and when wrong, promptly admit it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge and His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So I do put in the description what book we're reading and what page and the name of the um yeah, the chapter we are reading. My mind went blank for a minute. And this one is called The Vicious Cycle, and it is on page 219 in the fourth edition. So they are on different pages. That's why I put whatever the name of it is at the top in the description as well. So, because not all the books are the same. And can you hear me okay and see me okay? Thank you. How it finally broke a southern obstinacy and destined the salesman to start AA in Philadelphia. January 8, 1938. That was my D-Day. The place, Washington, D.C. This last real merry-go-round had started the day before Christmas, and I had really accomplished a lot in those 14 days. First, my new wife had walked out, baggage, and furniture. Then the apartment landlord had thrown me out of the empty apartment, and the finish was the loss of another job. After a couple of days in dollar hotels and one night in the pokey, I finally landed on my mother's doorstep, shaking apart with several days' beard, and of course, broke as usual. Many of these same things had happened to me many times before, but this time they had all descended together. For me, this was it. Here I was, 39 years old and a complete washout. Nothing had worked. Mother would take me in only if I stayed locked in a small storeroom and gave her my clothes and shoes. We had played this game before. That is the way Jackie found me, laying on a cot in my skivvies with hot and cold sweats, pounding heart, and that awful itchy starchiness all over. Somehow I had always managed to avoid DT. I seriously doubt I ever would have asked for help, but Fitz, an old school friend of mine, had persuaded Jackie to call on me. He had he come 2 or 3 days later, I think I would have thrown him out, but he hit when I was open for anything. Jackie arrived about 7 in the evening and talked until 3 a.m. I don't remember much of what he said, but I did realize that here was another guy exactly like me. Copper, please lay down. Go lay down. Now. Come here and lay down. Come on. Lay down. No, lay down. Thank you. He had been in the same laughing ac- academies and the same jails, known the same loss of jobs, same frustrations, same boredom, and the same loneliness. If anything, he had known all of them even better and more often than I. Yet he was happy, relaxed, confident, and laughing. That night, for the first time in my life, I really let down my hair and admitted my general loneliness. Jackie told me about a group of fellows in New York, of whom my old friend Fitz was one, who had the same problem I had, and who, by working together to help each other, were now not drinking and were happy like himself. He said something about God or a higher power, but I brushed that off. That was the that was for the birds, not for me. Little more of our talk stayed in my memory, but I do know I slept the rest of the night, while before I had never known what a real night's sleep was. This was my introduction to this understanding fellowship, although it was to be more than a year later after our society was to hear the name Alcoholics Anonymous. All of us in AA know the tremendous happiness that is in our sobriety. But there are also tragedies. My sponsor, Jackie, was one of these. He brought in many of our original members, yet he himself could not make it and died of alcoholism. The lesson of his death still remains with me, yet I often wonder what would have happened if somebody else had made that first call on me. So I always say that as long as I remember January 8th, that is how long I will remain sober. The old age question in AA is which came first, the neurosis or the alcoholism. I like to think I was fairly normal before alcohol took over. My early life was spent in Baltimore, where my father was a physician and a grain merchant. My family lived in very prosperous circumstances, and while both my parents drank, sometimes too much, neither was an alcoholic. Father was a very well integrated person, and while mother was high strung and a bit selfish and demanding, our home life was reasonably harmonious. There were four of us children, and although both of my brothers later became alcoholics, one died of alcoholism. My sister has never taken a drink in her life. Until I was 13, I attended public schools with promotions and average grades. I have never shown any particular talent, nor have I had any really frustrating ambitions. At 13, I was packed off of a very fine Protestant boarding school in Virginia, where I stayed 4 years, graduating without any special achievements. In sports, I made the track and tennis team. I got along well with the other boys and had a fairly large circle of acquaintances, but no in- intimate friends. I was never homesick and was always pretty self sufficient. However, here I probably took my first step toward my becoming alcoholism by developing a terrific aversion to all churches and established religions. At this school, we had Bible readings before each meal and church service 4 times on Sunday, and I became so rebellious at this that I swore I would never join or go to any church except for weddings or for funerals. At 17, I entered the university really to satisfy my father, who wanted me to study medicine. there, there as he had. That is where I had my first drink, and I still remember it, for every first drink afterwards did exactly the same trick. I could feel it go right through every bit of my body and down to my very toes. But each drink after the first seemed to become less effective, and after three or four they all seemed like water. I was never a hilarious drunk. The more I drank, the quieter I got, and the drunker I got, the harder I fought to stay sober. So it is clear that I never had any fun out of drinking. I would be the soberest seeming one in the crowd, and all of a sudden I would be the drunkest. Even that first night I blacked out, which leads me to believe that I was an alcoholic from my very first drink. The first year in college, I just got by in my studies. I majored in poker and drinking. I refused to join any fertility as I wanted to be a freelance, and that year my drinking was confined to one night stands, once or twice a week. The second year, my drinking was more or less restricted to weekends, but I was nearly kicked out for socialist scholarist failure. In the spring of 1917, in order to beat being fired from school, I became patriotic and joined the army. I am one of the lads who came out of the service with a lower rank than when I went in. I had been to OTC and the previous summer, so I went into the army as a sergeant, but I came out a private, and you really have to be unusual to do that. In the next 2 years, I washed more pans and peeled more potatoes than any other doughboy in the army. I became a periodic alcoholic. The periods always coming whenever I could make the opportunity. However, I did manage to keep out of the guardhouse. My last bout in the army lasted for from November 15th to the 11th, 1918. We heard by wireless on the 5th that the armistice would be signed the next day. This was a permanent report, so I had a couple of cognacs to celebrate. Then I hopped a truck and went AWOL. My next conscious memory was in Bar Ledok, many miles from base. It was November 11th, and bells were ringing and whistles blowing for the real armistice. There I was, unshaven, clothes torn and dirty, with no recollection of wandering all over France, but of course a hero to the local French. Back at camp, all was given because it was the end. But in that light of what I have since learned, I know I was a confirmed alcoholic at 19. This one's really long. Ow. With the war over the back in Baltimore with the folks, I had several small jobs for 3 years, and then I went to work soliciting as one of the first 10 employees of a new nation finance company. What an opportunity! I shot to pieces there. This company now does a volume of $3 billion annually. 3 years later, at 25, I opened and operated their Philadelphia office and was earning more than I ever had since. I was the fair haired boy, all right, but 2 years later I was blacklisted as an irresponsible drunk. It doesn't take long. My next job was in sales promotion for an oil company in Mississippi, where I promptly became a high man and got lots of pats on the back. Then I turned two company cars over in a short time and bingo, fired again. Oddly enough, the big shot who fired me from this company was one of the first men I met when I later joined the New York AA group. He had also gone all the way through the ringer and had been dry 2 years when I saw him again. After the oil job blew up, I went back to Baltimore and mother, my first wife, having said a permanent goodbye. Then I came a sale job with a national tire company. I recognized their city sale policy, and 18 months later, when I was 30, they offered me the branch managership. As part of this promotion, they sent me to their national convention in Atlantic City to tell the big wheel how I'd done it. At this time, I was holding what drinking I did down 2 weekends, but hadn't had a drink at all in a month. I checked into my hotel room and then noticed a placard tucked under the glass on the bureau stating there will be positively no drinking at this convention, signed by the president of the company. That did it. Who? Me? The big shot? The only salesman invited to talk at this convention? The man who was going to take over one of their biggest branches? Come going to take come Monday. I'd show him who was boss. No one in that company saw me again. 10 days later, I wired my resignation. As long as things were tough in the job uh, challenge, I could always manage to hold on pretty well. But as soon as I learned the combination, got the puzzle under control, and the boss to pat me on the back, I was gone again. Routine jobs bored me, but I would take on the toughest one. I could find and work day and night until I had it under control. Then it would become tedious and I'd lose all interest in it. I could never be bothered with the follow through and would invariably reward myself for my effort with that for strength. After the tired job came the 30s, the depression, and the downhill road. In the 8 years before AA found me, I had over 40 jobs selling and traveling, one thing after another, and the same old routine. I'd work like mad for 3 or 4 weeks without a single drink, save my money, pay a few bills, and then reward myself with alcohol. Then I'd be broke again, handling all in cheap hotels all over the country, having one night jail stands here and there, and always that horrible feeling, what's the use? Nothing is worthwhile. Every time I blacked out, and that was every time I drank, there was always that gnawing fear. What did I do this time? Once I found out many alcoholics have learned they can bring their bottle to a cheap movie theater and drink, sleep, wake up, and drink again in the darkness. I had repaired to one of these one morning with my jug, and when I left late in the afternoon, I picked up a newspaper on the way home. Image Imagine my surprise when I read in page one box that I had been taken for from the theater unconscious around noon that day, removed by ambulance to a hospital and stomach pump, and then released. Evidently, I had gone right back to the movie with a bottle, stayed there several hours, and started home with no recollection of what had happened. Excuse me. The mental state of the sick alcoholic is beyond description. I had no resentments against individuals. The whole world was all wrong. My thoughts went round and round with what it all about anyhow. People have wars and off each other. They struggle and cut each other for success. And what does anyone get out of this? Haven't I been successful? Haven't I accomplished extraordinary things in business? What do I get out of it? Everything's all wrong and the hell with it. For the last 2 years of my drinking, I prayed during every drunk that I wouldn't wake up again. 3 months before I met Jackie, I had made my second feeble try at opping myself. Hello, thank you for being here. This was the background that made me willing to listen on January 8th. After being dry 2 weeks and sticking close to Jackie, all of a sudden I found I had become the sponsor of my sponsor, for he was suddenly taken drunk. I was startled to learn he had only been off the booze a month or so before he brought me the message. However, I made an SOS call to the New York group whom I hadn't met yet, and they suggested we both come there. This we did this we did the next day, and what a trip. I really had a chance to see myself from a non-drinking point of view. We checked into the home of Hank, the man who had fired me 11 years before in Mississippi, and there I met Bill, our founder. Bill had then been dry 3 years, and Hank too. At the time, I thought them just a pair of screwballs, for they were not only going to save all the drunks in the world, but also all the so-called normal people. All they talked was of that first weekend was God, and how they were going to straighten out Jackie's and my life. In those days, we really took each other's inventories firmly and often. Despite all this, I did like these new friends because, again, they were like me. They had also been periodic big shots who had goofed out repeatedly at the wrong time, and they also knew how to split one paper match into three separate matches. This is very useful knowledge in places where matches are prohibited. They too had taken a train to one town and had wakened hundreds of miles in the opposite direction, never knowing how they got there. The same old routine seemed to be common to us all. During that first weekend, I decided to stay in New York and take all they gave out with, except the God stuff. I knew they gave out with, uh, I knew they needed to straighten out their thinking and habits, but I was all right. I just drank too much. Just give me a good front and a couple of bucks, and I'd be right back to the big time. I'd been dry these 3 weeks, had the wrinkles out, and had sobered up my sponsor all by myself. This book is Alcoholics Anonymous. This is an AA meeting. Bill and Hank had just taken over a small automobile polish company, and they offered me a job, $10 a week, and keep at Hank's house. We were all set to be DuPont out of business. At that time, the group in New York was composed of about 12 men who were working on the principle of every drunk for himself. We had no real formula and no name. We would allow one man's idea for a while, decide he was wrong, and switch to other methods, but we were staying sober as long as we kept and talked together. There was one meeting a week at Bill's home in Brooklyn, and we all took turns there spouting off about how we had changed our lives overnight. how many drunks we had saved and straightened out, and last but not least, how God had touched each of us personally on the shoulder. Boy, what a circle of confused idealists, yet we all had one really sincere purpose in our hearts, and that was not to drink. At our weekly meeting, I was a menace to serenity those first few months, for I took every opportunity to land based that spiritual angle, as we called it, or anything else that had anything of theology. Much later, I discovered the elders held many prayer meetings, hoping to find a way to give me the heave ho, but at the same time stay tolerant and spiritual. They did not seem to be getting an answer, for here I was staying sober and selling lots of auto polish on which they were making 1000% profit. So I rocked along my merry independent way until June, when I went out selling auto polish in New England. After a very good week, two of my customers took me to lunch on Saturday. We ordered sandwiches, and one man said 3 beers. I let mine sit. After a bit, the man said 3 beers. I let that sit too. Then it was my turn. I ordered 3 beers, but this time it was different. I had a cash investment of 30 cents and won a $10 a week salary. That's a big thing. So I drank all 3 beers, one after the other, and said, I'll be seeing you boys, and went around the corner for a bottle. I never saw either of them again. I had completely forgot, just a second. I had completely forgotten that the January 8th, when I found the fellowship, and I spent the next 4 days wandering around New England half drunk, by which I mean I couldn't get drunk and I couldn't get sober. I tried to contact the boys in New York by telegram, bounced right back, and when I finally got Hank on the telephone, he fired me right then. This was when I really took my first good look at myself. My loneliness was worse than it had ever been before. For now, even my own kind had turned against me. This time it really hurt, more than any hangover ever. My brilliant agnostic vanished, and I saw the first time that those who really believed, or at least honestly tried to find a power greater than themselves, were much more composed and contented than I had ever been, and they seemed to have a degree of happiness I had never known. Petting off my polished samples for expenses, I crawled back to New York a few days later in a very chastened frame of mind. When the others saw my altered attitude, they took me back in, but for me, they had to make it tough. If they hadn't, I don't think ever would have stuck it out. Once again, there was the challenge of a tough boy, but this time I was determined to follow through. For a long time, the only higher power I could concede was the power of the group, but this was far more than I had ever recognized before, and it was at least a beginning. It was also an ending, for never since June 16th, 1938, have I had to walk alone. Around this time, our big AA book, that's why I call it the big book, was being written, and it all became much simpler. We had a definite formula that some 60 of us agreed was the middle course for all alcoholics who wanted sobriety. And that 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 formula has not been changed one iota down through the years. I don't think the boys were completely convinced of my personality change, for they fought shy of including my story in the book. So my only contribution to their literary effort was my firm conviction, since I was still a theological rebel, that the word God should be qualified for the phrase as we understand him, for that was the only way I could accept spirituality. After the book appeared, we all became very busy in our efforts to save all the sundry, but I was still actually on the fringes of AA. While I went along with all that was done and attended the meetings, I never took an active job of leadership until February 1940. Then I got a very good position in Philadelphia and quickly found I would need a few fellow alcoholics around me if I was to stay sober. Thus, I found myself in the middle of a brand new group. When I started to tell the boys how we did it in New York and all about the spiritual part of the program, I found they would not believe me unless I was practicing what I preached. Then I found that as I gave in to the spiritual or personality change, I was getting a little more serenity in telling newcomers how to change their lives and attitudes. All of a sudden, I found I was doing a little changing myself. I had been too self sufficient to write a moral inventory, but I discovered in pointing out to the new man his wrong attitudes and actions that I was really taking my own inventory, and that if I expected him to change, I would have to work on myself too. This change has been a long, slow process for me, but through these later years, the dividends have been tremendous. In June 1945, with another member, I made my first and only 12 step call on a female alcoholic, and a year later I married her. She has been sober all the way through, and for me that has been good. We can share in the laughter and tears of our many friends, and most important, we can share our AA way of life and are given a daily opportunity to help others. In conclusion, I can only say that whatever growth or understanding has come to me, I have no wish to graduate. Very rarely do I miss the meetings of my neighborhood AA group, and my average has never been less than 2 meetings a week. I have served on only one committee in the past 9 years, for I feel that I had my chance the first few years and that newer member should fill the job. They are far more alert and progressive than we floundering fathers were, and the future of our fellowship is in their hands. We now live in the West and are very fortunate in our area AA. It is good, simple, and friendly, and our one desire is to stay in AA and not on it. Our pet slogan is Easy Does It, and I still say that as long as I remember that January 8th in Washington, that is how long, by the grace of God, as I understand Him, I will remain a happy sobriety or retain a happy sobriety. So for me, Lucretia, for me, yeah, easy does it, and going back out and happens, when I went out the first and last time I went out, um, and mind you, I hadn't gone to AA the first time I quit drinking, and so I didn't know about steps and traditions and all that stuff. I didn't have any books to read and stuff like that. So really, I was just staying sober. I wasn't changing anything else, just the alcohol, taking that out. And when I started AA, I was like this guy was, uh, closed off to the spiritual part and all of that, because I was baptized, but I got baptized because that's what my grandmother wanted. And I know that sounds bad, but I really wanted her to be happy. And I wanted to make sure that I did something she wanted. And so I got baptized because she wanted me to, not because I wanted to. And I got my kids baptized as well. And I don't go to church. I have not been to church in many years. And when they started talking about God and all the spiritual stuff, that's where I was like, nope, nope, nope. But I kept going. And I'm glad I kept going because I learned through the books and my friends that I have made in AA that this work that we do in the books, doing our jobs in the meetings, because when I first started, my sponsor gave me a job to do for the meetings, and it was my part of contributing to the meeting. I set out the pamphlets. So I got to set up the little stand and put the pamphlets up on there and all that stuff. And then, I started, I didn't read out of the books when I first started. And so my sponsor got me to do that. And then she hadn't ever been a guest speaker, and so she signed up to be a guest speaker, and she signed me up with her. But it was a small group, and I did tell part of my story, and that's where I got my voice back. Because I was really closed off. I didn't talk about it- my alcoholism and all that stuff. But once I did that uh, uh, speaker meeting, um, and I had all the groups, everybody there of two groups was, I got so much support from them that it was amazing. And so I learned to use my voice, and I use my voice even when it might make somebody mad, because I have to stay real to myself. And um, thank you, Lucretia. I hope people uh get help out of it. But truthfully, I'm coming up on 9 years, and it feels like yesterday that I stepped into the AA world. And it's from reading the books again, and just realizing that, yeah, that's when I did my spiritual aha. That's when I got that aha, was when I read this chapter. um because aha, I can pick whatever I want to be my higher power. um and I had people to talk to about my feelings and about things that I had done in my past that not everybody needed to know. And that is so great to have someone you can confide in. And, you know, I know it's probably a lot on our sponsors, because I have sponsees that I help. Um, and, I don't go telling their information. Just like when somebody here or texting or messenger on Facebook and stuff, that's my personal stuff. And when somebody talks to me about stuff, that's between me and that person, because it's not anybody else's business. And I do keep it to myself. And I just hope that when I'm asked the questions, that I'm actually helping. I do know that one person would ask me questions about the God thing, and I was like, she's like, I don't believe in God, and I was like, well, you don't have to. Just because you don't believe in God doesn't mean you can't go to AA, that you can't get some help out of AA, or that you can't read this book. I mean, anybody can do it. Everybody can do these steps and these traditions and read these books and try and find a meeting, even if it's here on YouTube. Um, it's one of the best gifts that you can receive for free when you're an alcoholic, or when you have a friend or family member that needs help. Because sometimes those people do need to know ways that they can reach out to that person and say, hey, I think you might need to talk to somebody about this. Because if you look back and remember, when you were still drinking, we were ashamed of what we were doing, and we don't really want people to know, because after all, we thought we were fooling everybody. But still, we really didn't want anyone to know, and so we didn't tell anyone. not even ourselves. But once you do, you feel so much better knowing that there are other people like you that are here to help, that can help guide you to your sobriety and your sobriety path in life. And we do all still make mistakes. We all do still have to make amends, but that's part of life, and that's something that us as alcoholics, recovering alcoholics, have to accept, is that we need to confront those things right there as it is, and make it make your amend, relatively soon. Um, but we're we're not guaranteed every day to be sober, but we have today, and today is what matters. And the 24 hours of today is all that matters. I'm blessed that I woke up this morning sober. I'm blessed that I can go through my life sober, and without AA and my friends and my family, I might not even be here, you know? And that's how I think of it, is I would rather deal with life sober than to not be here. So, I mean, and not every day is going to be great and wonderful. Um, when you're drinking, every day isn't great and wonderful. But when you're sober, you can easily, it makes it easier to go with those real feelings and know exactly how you feel, and it's not um, fake. You're not being fake. So, you're a jerk and you can get out of here now. Ron, goodbye. But yeah, so like we we just have to go for ourselves, and because after all, if you don't want to be sober, you're not going to be sober, and it might take a long time for someone to come around and do that first step. Or like me, it took me a long time after I admitted to myself that I was an alcoholic. It took me quite a while to stop drinking. Matter of fact, I stopped when I hit my eyeball, and that was the year that I went sober. So, but the only thing that we can do is just be strong and be here to listen, to be that friend, to be that support. And it being able to share something that works for me, that is free, on a free platform, I'm all for it. My sobriety is my passion. It is my life. It is what I want more than anything, and I'm not willing to give it up. Not willing to give it up. So, um, thank you, Willie. Um, wow, that's awesome, Lucretia. That's awesome. Super cool. I'm gonna read today's husband just went off a lunch. Um, so I'm going to read today's daily reflection. Today I'm 8 years, 10 months, 11 days, or 3,237 days sober. Hi, Ivan. Just getting ready to read the daily reflection. Please watch the replay. Okay, today is September 26th, and this one is Our Children. The alcoholic may find it hard to re-establish friendly relations with his children, his or her children. In time, they will see that he or she is a new man or woman, and in their own way, they will let the parent know. From that point on, progress will be rapid. Marvelous results often follow such a reunion. And that's Alcoholics Anonymous, page 134. Mike, can you take him out, please? While on the road to recovery, I received a gift that could not be purchased. It was a card from my son in college saying, "Parent, you can't imagine how glad I am that everything is okay. Happy birthday, I love you." My son had told me that he loved me before. It had been during the previous Christmas holidays when he had said to me crying, "Parent, I love you. Can't you see what you're doing to yourself?" I couldn't. Took with emotion I had cried, but this time, when I received my son's card, my tears were tears of joy, not not desperation. I went through that too. When I got sober, my kids were like, "Wow, you're totally different, Mom." So, yeah. But we have today of sobriety, and we have many more to go. And I hope you guys know that um, I do these for you and myself. Um, I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to be perfect. I just want to be able to share this with all of you, that there is a way you can get sober. And I hope you guys find your way to sobriety if you have not yet. And just know that you're not alone. There are a lot of us. And so, with that, I'm going to say the Serenity Prayer and then let you guys go and enjoy the rest of your day. Um, so, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. Love you guys. Have a great day.